Good morning, everybody. This is a special report from the National Tropical Weather Conference. We're here this morning with Bill Reed and, of course, Tim Smith as well out there. Bill, tell us what you've got going on and what we see happening out across the area today.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I should be sharing my screen. And that's not where I want to be. I want to be over on this side. And I want to start with that. There's this current satellite animation. It's a water vapor loop centered over the Caribbean. Just east of the islands and coming into the northeast Caribbean is what is now Tropical Storm Laura. And you can see the dry air surrounding it. There's a pocket of moisture that's been holding Laura together the last several days. And further to the west is what is forecast to become Marco. Still fairly disorganized, a lot of convection, but it doesn't hold together in any standard format you jump on right away to be a tropical storm. Some of the other key features is the big subtropical high, currently centered about in here. And then this big trough of low pressure, very anomalous high amplitude weather pattern over North America. We've got this trough of low pressure in the mid and upper levels, brought wonderful dry air down into even the coastal regions of Texas. And there's the influence of that is this northward flowing air. That coupled with the ridge is eventually what is forecast to steer Laura straight up into the Gulf of Mexico. Take a look at them a little closer here. This is Laura. There's some lightning in it still. That's a sign of some development maybe, but there's still, I don't see a whole lot of organization. You can see some curvature in this one outer band. That's where the strong Honduras and off the coast of Belize at this time. Aircraft have been flying into the storm today, and I always like to give kudos to them. This is the look-see into the system out east of the islands, and you can see this is where the center is down here, and the strongest wind field is way out here outside of the convection that they were flying through in there. So it's still a poorly organized system there. And earlier this morning, the Air Force flew into our system down in the Gulf, which is soon to be Marco. And again, they found maybe two centers swirling around the one common center that looks like we're seeing on the satellite now, and no winds of tropical storm force. Hence, they're keeping it as a tropical depression. The G4 will be flying in the Gulf of Mexico starting tomorrow, and I'll actually fly several missions after that covering the track environment for both storms as they approach the continental United States. Let's look at this. I'll give you a little snapshot here. We're just starting to get the 12Z, and let me go back to the one that I've got the data on. Okay, 500 millibar field to give you a general feel of the overall synoptic pattern that's going to affect these. Here's our large high pressure, anomalously strong high pressure north of the Caribbean covering the southwest Atlantic, and here's our very strong trough in the mid-levels centered over the south, digging down into the Gulf of Mexico. As time marches on, oh man, there we go. Get fill in there. Okay, the high builds and extends westward into the eastern Gulf of Mexico off the Atlantic as the trough holds together but retrogrades back into Texas. That'll set up a steady, strong south southeast to north-northwest current that Marco will be embedded in, and it'll pretty much forecast to keep it a straight track to the coast there. So once we get a well-defined center, and especially after it comes off Yucatan, we'll get a lot more certainty on the track forecast, confidence we'll have there. Laura, meanwhile, with a little caveat, the GFS doesn't develop it as much as the forecast calls for, so this may not pan out that way, but it stays stuck under the very strong easterly steering current and move west-northwest steadily until it gets into the Gulf, when it too may make the turn in there. Get it up closer to the landfall there. And as you can see, that flow pattern becomes a little more north-northwest for Laura as the landfall time frame comes in there. Another thing that we want to look at on the intensity, both storms have a challenge on the intensity forecast. Laura is going to be coming very close to the big islands of Hispaniola and Cuba. And depending on how much of it's over there, it might really detract from its structure. Or if it goes a little north of there, it might have a more favorable environment. We just won't know until we have a better feel for the center and where it's going to track. Otherwise, Marco to be is embedded in a lot of moisture and low wind shear environment down here in the Caribbean. This is the 700 to 400 millibar winds, mean winds, and mean relative humidity. A good way to look at both dry air and shear. Note all the dry air from that trough that's dropped down into the Gulf of Mexico, and dry air that's been tracking all along just ahead of and north of Laura coming across. And I'll just time step you through this and get the feel for some of the issues. Oh man, come on. What I'm going to be showing here is that there's going to be a shear and dry air issue for Marco when it gets into the northern Gulf of Mexico. Here it is right about at landfall. Look, the brown is dry air. Look at all the dry air that's surrounding the center even, and the southwesterly wind shear factor that's going in there. On the other side of the Gulf, where Laura's supposed to go, it's embedded in warm, moist air and light to moderate at best wind shear showing up in that mid-level range in there. Okay, with that, I'm going to switch gears and we're going to get to the bottom line here. Here's the latest advisory on Laura. It's going to enter the islands today, and there's a tropical storm warnings out for the Northeast Caribbean to Puerto Rico, and tropical storm watches out for the islands further downstream, the Turks and Caicos and the north coasts of Haiti and Dominican Republic. And you see the track carries it right on the coast there. A little bit further south, it might be more destructive to the system. A little further north, maybe a little bit more favorable for it to develop. They bring it up to a hurricane as it comes into the northeastern Gulf in respect to the hurricane model solutions and the fact that the environment does look quite favorable in there at that time. The onset of conditions is shown probably not readable on most people's screen in there, but obviously we're looking at about a day in advance on the tropical storm force on the north coast and over the weekend here in the islands. Meanwhile, for Marco wannabe, tropical storm warnings and a hurricane watch are out for portions of the Yucatan and the Bay Islands off Honduras. It might actually get the hurricane somewhere right off here and then decrease again as it comes across the Yucatan, and is forecast to reach hurricane strength as it crosses the Gulf of Mexico. That wind shear and dry air are supposed to bring her back down to a tropical storm strength as it comes pretty close to my backyard during the day on Tuesday in there. Lots of uncertainty in both of these forecasts. And yeah, there's again, the key issues on this is exactly what it'll survive and come across the Gulf as. And again, it's out in the day 4 and 5 frame. There's a lot of issues with that. Just a couple more slides here, and then I'll open it up to questions. Here's the current rainfall forecast, the landfalls are coming in just at the end period of the QPF, so it's not a time when they can accurately expect to give a good QPF forecast. But obviously, the high values shown over the Gulf are indicative of what might occur when the storm actually comes in. Too soon to pinpoint that. Here was the track guidance for Laura, and again, it's further south and west than it had been the last couple of runs. And the official forecast is going to be on the north side of that envelope of track forecasts. The intensity is all over the map, with some models never getting it above a weak tropical storm, and the HWRF absolutely having a feast on it, and they're bringing it up to a major hurricane. It's a tough call to make on how to make that forecast, but a little too early to jump on it that big. Those who like to look at ensembles, all three of the models are fairly similar, at least through the 120-hour time frame, bringing it close to Florida, close to land, but just on this very close, very tight thing, which is what you expect coming underneath the strong subtropical high like that. As for Marco Wannabe, there's a little more spread in the guidance. Anywhere from perhaps the middle up to upper Texas coast to the center to Vermilion Bay and Louisiana are fair game at this time. And depending on how strong Laura is coming into the Gulf of Mexico, there could be some interaction between the two systems that will change this picture a little. And once again, the intensity forecast, the HWRF is pretty rambunctious with it, holding it up to a hurricane at landfall on the near landfall as it comes into the Gulf, with most of the others just barely reaching hurricane or tropical storm force. The ensembles for it show all the European shows this tremendous opportunity to go just about anywhere. I don't know how you can pick anything other than it's going to move north out of that. Pretty much the same with the GFS and the UK Met from last night. A little further east maybe with its centroid than the others. Okay, that's what I had to present. I'd be glad for comments, critiques, or questions.
Thanks, Bill. I'll start with the first question that just came in now. This is from Casper, asking if the building high over the western Atlantic is causing the retrograde of the upper level low over the western Gulf.
It may play part of a role. I actually didn't look that closely at it, but when I was looking at it yesterday, somewhat of a flattening of the ridge in the west and an increase in the mainstream of the westerlies in the Canadian-U.S. border area. And below that ridge would be the retrograde at that point.
Talk about the rarity of this, because, seeing two systems in the Gulf at the same time, that's been all over the place. I know Dr. Phil has posted a couple of things about it, but you've been doing this a long time. We all have. And I don't recall ever seeing potentially two hurricanes in the Gulf at the same time.
Well, in my youth, when the old sailors on the sailing ships would come and visit me, no. I like Dr. Neil Frank's comments. He'd start off right off the bat on this kind of question. Says, in general, a hurricane is a rare event. You have 100 tropical waves a year come rolling across the Atlantic, and on average, 12 of them develop. So anytime you get two in close proximity at the same time, that's a multiplication of the rarities. And yes, it's a very rare event. I think there was some discussion I saw yesterday about 1959 was the only thing anyone had seen where simultaneously there were two storms going on. One was making landfall south of you in Mexico, and the other one was making landfall in Florida as an unnamed hurricane. I got to go find the story of that someday.
And there was the 33 when we had the Cuba-Brownsville storm, and the one that came across Florida and briefly came in the Gulf up in the northeast corner over there. So technically it was in the Gulf, but half of it maybe back in 1933, the other super active season.
Yeah, 33 was the year that the Gulf was just explosive. There are all kinds of tracks across the Gulf.
Exactly. So the rarity of it is one thing. Let's bring up the F word, because we're seeing it brought up a lot, and that's the Fujiwara word. what do we know about interaction between two storms that are that close together? Because we don't see it very often. What do we know about it?
I think they have. It happens more often in the Pacific, hence probably the name. A long time ago, I read a short paper on that, and when I was in school, we actually had to do the mathematics to show why the Fujiwara works. It has long slipped my mind, but it has to do with the relative strengths or weaknesses. If you remember the perfect storm back in 1990, it was a Hurricane Grace. The extratropical storm was huge, and Grace was not all that big, but still it looked like a dot, and it spun around the contributor to the Fujiwara effect.
Sergio wants to know if the Fujiwara could slow Marco down and cause it to move more westward. I think Sergio is concerned about deep South Texas.
I don't really see any indication of that. Slowing it down makes some sense. And also see if the easternmost storm it strengthens as much as some of the models indicate, that the outflow coming out of the northwest and flowing first west and southwest would even complicate the shearing going on whatever Marco is at that time. Could end up being a deterrent for Marco also, just from the subsidence and shearing that would be going on from the outflow from Laura.
Johanna's asking, I may have understood wrong, but Marco has two centers with a question mark. How or why does that happen? Two basic areas of circulation as it gets better organized.
Well, there's a broad cyclonic flow that the depression exists in, and without a strong eye and the dynamics that go with that, you get little eddies around the center of the area there, and that's what these weak eddies, and they're transient. They don't last forever. There was a tropical storm Francis back in '98 in the Gulf of Mexico that almost right up till almost landfall didn't have a good consolidated center, and it was fascinating on satellite to watch all the little circular swirls moving in the center.
It seems the models are coming together now on both of these systems, at least to a degree. Do you see anything where they can just go where they could go wrong? You see a problem where something dramatically different could happen? Do you see a scenario?
Not so much on the track. Those are two large scale features with a pretty strong current, both the interaction of the upper trough and the westward building ridge on Marco, and then the being underneath a strong ridge for Laura. I just don't see I don't know what could go wrong to totally mess that up, at least through the 72 to 96 hour time frame. You always have, you start getting into where if there are errors in the model, they get complicated if you get out past 3 or 4 days. Intensity, it's all over the map. Right now, you're starting out with two very poorly organized storms, and trying to forecast exactly how intense these will become if they get organized. We don't have a lot of skill at that.
Jamie's asking what you expect to see with the next run of the Hurricane Hunters. What do you think they're going to find out there?
On the eastern one, I think it's still so disheveled and whatnot. I think it's going to be a while before it shows much consolidation. I would not be surprised if later this afternoon we see more convection banding and maybe a more stable center on Marco.
Let's see. I'm just trying to read all the questions. There's a lot of them coming in. Good information, Bill. Thank you. What percentage of these two storms doing the Fujiwara effect? I don't know if I quite understand what the question is asking, but
well, I have no idea. I mean, my knowledge of Fujiwara goes studied a long time ago, and I'm just not up on it.
I'm glad it's not just me. Good. Would the Intermountain Ridge play a role?
Yeah, and since it's a large scale feature and large scale changes are going on with it, weakening it somewhat, that is what is allowing the trough over the Gulf to retrograde to the west. As that high shrinks, the easterly flow will be deeper down to the south there that'll allow the trough to move west.
Do you see anything in the long range that suggests that once one of these or both of these get anything to cause them to stall?
Given where I live, I kind of worry about that every time, and the flow isn't all that strong, and it's a split between the highs that's left over. So yeah, that could happen, but right now there's nothing in the forecast models that you can hang your hat on to say, ha, we're going to have one of those.
Good. All right, that's all the questions that are coming in. Do you have anything you want to finish out with, Bill? Because it's great information. I think we're really able to let folks know what at least the thinking is right now, and that's important.
Yeah, well, I've already done my store runs, and I think if people are actually watching this, they'll start seeing runs on the stores in our particular area. So if you haven't done your preparations, now's the time to get them done. Or if you've done your preparations like I am, this afternoon would be a great time to play golf.
That's good. Well, that brings us then to our thanking of our sponsors. We always want to thank our sponsors who make these events possible. USAA makes this a possibility. Also, South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. And also, the great folks at Ply Locks. I have one, right? Have you ever seen a Ply Lock? That's what it looks like, and you put it on your plywood. If you have a really tiny window, this is what it would look like on your window. You basically slide it in, and go this way with it. Slide it in when the hurricane's over. It locks. These grips lock on the brick. When you're done, you pop it. It slides right back out. Put it back in your garage, and you save it for next time. And in fact, my neighbor saw me messing with him yesterday, and he went out and bought some. And I can see him out the window. He's cutting his plywood as we speak to put the ply locks on, just to be ready, just in case. And that's the bottom line here. So, Bill, thank you. We appreciate it. Great update.
It was fun.
Thanks all the viewers for being with us today. We appreciate it. You can continue to type your questions, and if there's a good one, we'll try to get it answered. Bill will type it and answer a little bit later on the questions that we didn't get to today. So thank you. Alex, do you have anything back in San Antonio?
That's about it. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us this morning, and I apologize for a little bit of the audio issues. We'll be having more special reports on these storm systems as they get a little bit closer. Again, thanks so much for being with us this